sex, money, power. These three words engulfed this thin-skinned and wildly insecure French emperor, often referred to as the Little Corporal by his soldiers. Napoleon Bonaparte would go on to reshape the map of Europe, leaving an undeniable mark on history. Napoleon's life is a captivating and complex narrative of ambition, strategic brilliance, and a relentless pursuit of power.
What is your name?
Napoleon.
Has the course of my life just changed?
His story is not merely one of military conquests, but a sweeping epic that includes moments of triumph and tragedy, romance and revolution. His overwhelming insecurities fueled his life campaign as being one of the greatest conquerors in history. But they may have also led to his eventual downfall. Join us in this video as we journey through the life of Napoleon Bonaparte and dive into the man behind the legend, exploring the events that transformed the Little Corporal into the fiercest general of all time. Napoleon Bonaparte was born on August 15, 1769, on the island of Corsica. The island of Corsica was a French territory, but the people who lived there were still considered foreign by the French people. His family, the Bonapartes, owned land and a comfortable home, but they were far from wealthy. From a young age, Napoleon was determined to rise. His journey began at the age of 9 when he left home to attend the military academy in northern France at Brienne. His foreign background and questionable noble lineage made him a target for bullying by his fellow students. Although he made friends, Napoleon's introverted nature and defensive posture caused him to spend his early years distanced from others. He had a certain sense of arrogance that did not sit well with his superiors. In a society that centered around social status and background, Napoleon struggled to rise above others, as they considered him a brute, instead of the genius that he was. Growing up, he was a voracious reader, often mesmerized and writing about following in the footsteps of Alexander the Great and Caesar. It would not be long, however, before he would get his chance. Right before the age of 20, Napoleon found himself in the middle of one of the bloodiest and most ruthless revolutions in history. During the Reign of Terror, the guillotine, or national razor as it was nicknamed, became the common instrument of execution. King Louis XVI, known as the last king of France, and Queen Marie Antoinette were executed by the guillotine in 1792. During the Revolution, the French monarchy and privileged aristocracy were overthrown by a group of partisans called the Republicans, who believed in a more egalitarian society and equal rights for all people, not just those born into wealth. Napoleon jumped at the opportunity to serve during the Revolution, as this was his opportunity to rise within society. As a French officer in the military, he was called upon to squash two uprisings within the country, one in the south of France and the other in Paris. As a result of his successes, he was promoted to brigadier general, and shortly after, in 1795, he became a division commander of his own army. At the ripe age of 24, Napoleon had accomplished an astonishing feat and was rapidly moving up the ranks. As the French Revolution dwindled on, France became involved in major European conflicts on all fronts. Napoleon would soon be called upon to lead his first army in Italy against Austria to expand France's new revolutionary ideas. Napoleon quickly learned that his army was far inferior, often underpaid, and lacking equipment. His strategic genius, however, made up for his demoralized men. By 1797, Napoleon's army had achieved 7 victories in 7 months against a much larger Austrian army. Napoleon would often be on the front lines side by side with his soldiers, demonstrating to them his willingness and determination to always achieve victory. Not long after his army's achievements, he created an image of invincibility. He founded 2 newspapers and launched a public campaign intended to showcase his accomplishments, often hailing him as a hero. This would feed his ego and also increase his army's morale. With French leaders worried about Napoleon's rise to power, they sent him far away to Egypt in an effort to lessen Britain's power in the region. The campaign, however, suffered a tragic naval defeat, with roughly 1,700 French sailors losing their lives. Although Napoleon suffered a major military defeat in Egypt, he continued to build his image so successfully at home that many saw him as the savior of the nation. His innate insecurities made him sensitive to any criticism. He would constantly censor the press and eliminate anyone who spoke in opposition to him. This allowed Napoleon to garner fame that few men in history had achieved. He used the opportunity to seize power and began rebuilding France from the ruins of the revolution. While his military victories spoke for themselves, many people were not sure if Napoleon had the ability to govern. He took the challenge straight on and immediately enacted reform in many different parts of France. To fix the economy, he signed into law a new national bank, currency reform, and improved the taxation and welfare system. In 1804, he established the Napoleonic Codes, which were written laws influenced by Napoleon to modernize and unify France. Although Napoleon was wildly popular, he also faced many death threats and multiple assassination attempts against his life. Once again, he felt threatened by his opposition within France and needed to strengthen his position. On December 2, 1804, Napoleon, in an elaborate ceremony at Notre Dame, claimed himself emperor. In a power-related move, Napoleon took the crown and placed it upon his own head. Typically, the Pope would have been the person to crown a new emperor, but Napoleon wanted to make sure everyone knew that he was in charge. After much debate by historians, Napoleon is considered to be the greatest general of all time. Statistically on the battlefield, he engaged in over 70 battles in his career, winning 59 of them and only losing 11, achieving an 84% win-loss ratio. After becoming emperor at the age of 35, Napoleon went on a conquering spree, taking on almost everyone in his path. Known as the Napoleonic Wars, he invaded countries left and right, including Spain, Austria, and Russia. In one of his greatest victories, Napoleon crushed the Russian and Austrian armies at the Battle of Austerlitz. The series of conflicts rocked Europe from 1803 to 1815. Napoleon was a masterful technician on the battlefield and implemented tactics that would simply overwhelm the enemy. He was generally loved by his men, which gave him an edge on the battlefield. During his first campaign in Italy, in a daring maneuver, he crossed the Alps and won a great victory at the Battle of Marengo. His use of deception and surprise would overwhelm the enemy and ensure victory when facing a much larger force. Another key element of Napoleon's strategy involved the rapid movement of his army. He would divide his forces into smaller units, giving them the ability to command themselves. This allowed them to move fast, live off the land, outmaneuver the enemy, and destroy them in a quick and effective manner. Despite his military brilliance, Napoleon couldn't keep up the winning streak forever. He struggled to defeat the British at sea, which destroyed his hopes of ever conquering England. In 1812, when Tsar Alexander of Russia defied Napoleon, he felt so threatened by him that he gathered the greatest ground force the world had ever seen to invade Russia. Napoleon's massive army consisted of 480,000 troops and 120,000 reservists. The Russian winter devastated Napoleon's army. When they made it to Moscow, they found it in ruins, a tactic used by the Russians to starve Napoleon's army. It worked, and Napoleon was forced to retreat. By the time he returned to France, it was estimated that only 20,000 troops of the original army made it back. The loss opened the door for a coalition of European powers, including Russia, Prussia, and Austria, to gang up on him. Napoleon repeatedly turned down opportunities to secure peace and salvage his rule. Because he was entrenched in his low self-esteem, he believed that victory was the only thing that could redeem him. Unfortunately, his own insecurities led to his demise. In 1815, at the Battle of Waterloo, Napoleon faced off against the British and Prussian forces, and well, let's just say it didn't end well for him. He was defeated, exiled to the remote island of St. Helena, where he was constantly surrounded by 2,000 British soldiers and forced to spend the rest of his days. Although Napoleon was nicknamed the Little Corporal, scholars suggest that this was not because of his height. Instead, it was a nickname given to him by his soldiers. Napoleon was indeed 5'6", which was considered to be an average height during the 1800s. On a more personal note, Napoleon suffered from many inferiority complexes. For most of his life, he struggled with love, and his 2 marriages were far from perfect. He met his first wife, Josephine, in 1795. She was a widow who was 5 years older than Napoleon, but their love affair was nothing short of explosive. The couple was known to constantly cheat on each other, but historians believe that Josephine was Napoleon's first and only love in life. Although he loved Josephine, he divorced her in 1810 because she could not produce an heir. Napoleon then remarried with the 19-year-old Marie-Louise, the Archduchess of Austria. In the context of history, Napoleon was a brutal emperor, a fierce general, and an epic lover. But his mark on history cannot be denied. Decades after Napoleon's death, Most of Europe had succumbed to the ideals spread by the French Revolution, ending most of the monarchies. Napoleon died at the age of 51 in 1821. His body was returned to Paris 20 years later, where he was buried at the Hôtel des Invalides.